There are tons of new battery options on the market. We've covered several of the leading products from companies like Tesla, Franklin, SolarEdge, and Enphase. One prominent YouTuber chose the Enphase IQ Battery 5P for his net zero home. Did he make the right choice? We're going to dig into the video and find out. The smarter way to go solar.
The number of whole home battery solutions out there can make your head spin. It's a real charge to the senses. Everywhere I looked at CES this past January, someone had a shocking modular whole home battery solution. Well, I've made my decision, or rather, I made my decision a while ago and just...
By the way, he's absolutely right about that, and it's the same thing at the solar conferences. There are literally dozens and dozens of new battery manufacturers, and a lot of them are presenting them as all-in-one: battery, inverter, transfer switch, as if these are all innovative things. A lot of these are just copycat products. They're all copying each other. There's probably about 5 or 6 real innovators that need to be taken seriously, and the rest are a bunch of copycat companies.
First, I think we should hit on, what did I get? What you see here in my garage is 4 of the new Enphase IQ 5P batteries. Each one of these has 3.84 kilowatts of power output.
Okay, so first impression on this, guys, and I like Enphase, I like what they do, but that is a very cumbersome looking installation.
Ugh. Brother, ugh.
If you notice there's 4 separate battery components, transfer switch, combiner box, and all these different conduits and connectors to connect everything up. So I would say my first impression, aesthetically, this is probably not the best looking whole home battery solution, but let's see what's going on.
Power output, 7.68 kilowatts peak and 5 kilowatt hours of storage, as well as a 15-year warranty. Now what that means for my total system is about 15.
Yeah, here's a nice look at the whole system here. So that is a lot. That's a lot of pipe to put on your wall. One thing I don't like about Enphase's design, because they broke the battery up into such small building blocks, you need 4 separate batteries to achieve a realistic capacity for whole home backup. And then, as I mentioned, you've got the system controller, the combiner, the AC disconnect, that looks like a critical load panel perhaps, that's the battery combiner panel. It's just ugly.
15 kilowatts of power output and 20 kilowatt hours of storage. Now for the power output, that's more than enough to cover my entire house with all the major appliances running and even charging my car. They're tied into a 17.2 kilowatt Enphase solar power setup, which is made up of 43 REC Alpha 400 panels. If you want to hear all the details about that setup, I've got a full video walkthrough of what I did there and why. I'll link to that in the description. The bottom line though is that I stayed within one ecosystem for batteries, solar controllers, and inverters. And that leads straight into, why this battery?
Yeah, so he makes a good point there too about the ecosystem, especially when you're talking about Enphase. And if I'm looking at just purely the solar side of the system, I personally do like the choice of the REC solar panels with the Enphase microinverters. But he's right, if you're looking for a more seamless user experience, everything on a single app, going with the Enphase battery makes sense. That way everything is talking to each other. All right, let's continue.
Or any battery. So right off the bat, I want to answer the question, is Enphase the best battery on the market? Well, no, not necessarily, but it's what's inside that is. That would be a lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery, which in my opinion is the best battery chemistry that you can get for your home today. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Enphase, LG, Sonnen, or any other brand. If they're using LFP batteries, then I think you're on the right track. They aren't the most cutting edge battery technology, but when it comes to longevity, safety, and cost, they're the ones to beat right now. Now for Enphase specifically, I'm kind of a...
Yep, pretty much the whole market knows this now, right? LFP is the new thing. It's more durable. It's safer for indoor use, especially if you're considering a home battery for use inside your home. But again, there's dozens and dozens of companies that are offering LFP batteries now. So the fact that this is an LFP chemistry to me is not really noteworthy at this point. That's the expected standard.
Now for Enphase specifically, I'm kind of a fan of microinverters for home energy generation. Instead of having one large inverter that handles all the DC power that your solar panels generate, you have a microinverter behind every single solar panel on your roof. That redundancy has pros and cons like anything else. There's always trade-offs. But at the core, it means that if one inverter or panel goes bad, your entire string of panels doesn't go down for the count. Well,
yeah, that's true. One thing I should mention, and I've been getting a lot of feedback too from the viewers on this, is that modern solar panels include bypass diodes. So the power that's lost when shade hits part of the solar panel, it's not quite as bad as the solar panels of even 5 or 10 years ago. So the amount of performance gained by installing MLPEs is not quite as high. It's not as significant. However, the redundancy, and I think that's what he's about to touch on here, is that it does provide maximum redundancy, because if one microinverter fails, you're only losing production of that one microinverter. The rest of the system can still operate at full power. Let's continue.
These Enphase batteries are actually using the same type of microinverter inside the battery chassis. There are 6 embedded IQD8 BAT microinverters sitting above the LFP battery cell packs. And just like the redundancy on my roof, the same thing happens inside the battery. If one of these inverters goes bad, the battery will keep working, albeit at a slightly diminished capacity. This all means my system will keep chugging along while I wait for a replacement part or service. And yes, there are still energy losses every time you convert energy from DC to AC and then back to DC again and then back to AC again. If you have solar with a string inverter, not microinverters, the DC energy from the panels can go straight into the battery as DC energy. No conversion needed. In my case, there's conversions happening before the energy gets into the battery and back out again, so I'm losing about 10% or so there. However, I knew this going in and accounted for that kind of loss when calculating how much solar I wanted to install on my roof.
Yep, so he makes a good point here, right? You've probably heard us use the term in the past, the triple conversion penalty. You know, Solar Edge always talks about that triple conversion penalty when you have to take DC power from solar, invert it to AC to send it into your breaker panel, then you take it from AC back into DC to charge the battery internally, and then when it's time to run something off the battery, you have to pull from the battery in DC format, invert it to AC to send AC power to loads within the house, circuits within the house. So that's true. This is not going to be the most efficient in terms of round trip efficiency. This architecture is not the most efficient. Really what this microinverter based architecture is all about is redundancy. Now, one thing that he didn't mention, and now that the Tesla Powerwall 3 is part of this battery conversation, is those microinverters that are doing the DC to AC conversion for the battery. I really, it's going both ways, DC to AC, AC to DC when the battery is discharging. Those microinverters inside the battery, in theory, they could be doing the inverter function for the solar as well. And that's what Tesla has done different with their new Powerwall 3, is they just said, look, we need inverters for the solar panels and for the batteries. Let's just make the batteries inverter available for the solar input as well. That way you have one integrated appliance and you don't have to have all these different boxes everywhere. But let's continue.
Because the Enphase IQ5P comes in smaller component blocks, that means you can really dial in exactly how much storage you want or need and keep the price in check. You're only jumping in 5 kilowatt-hour blocks as you add each 5P battery. Other battery systems like Tesla's Powerwall jump in 13.5 kilowatt-hour blocks. That makes it hard to nail down the perfect cost to storage ratio that you might need. But that raises the big question, what did it cost?
Okay, so he's kind of presented it in such a way that having the smaller 5 kilowatt-hour building blocks is an advantage. The reality is he needed 4 of them for his house to have adequate storage for his house, whereas Tesla looked at it and said, look, with a single Tesla Powerwall 3, that's going to be sufficient for the majority of homes, just a single Tesla battery. For those that need more, they go to a second battery. But if you look at the total cost of installation with all material and equipment cost, I think what feedback I'm hearing from installers is that the Tesla Powerwall 3 based system is actually significantly cheaper end price to the customer and significantly cheaper in terms of labor to install. But let's continue.
What did it cost? Now there's no sugarcoating this. It was expensive. All in, this cost $33,000, which is typical for the area where I live. And it's really hard to compare apples to apples here. And before you start furiously commenting, it only cost X dollars where I live, or I did my own battery installation for half that, remember that location is a huge driver of cost.
Location, location, location.
Now I've talked about this issue before because it's relevant to solar panel comparisons too. Your mileage is absolutely going to vary, so it might cost you much less where you live. Now that said, it's expensive going the route I went. I could have saved a lot of money buying a similar sized AC capable battery system and tying it into my Enphase setup. But for instance, if I had bought a similarly sized LFP battery from BigBattery.com, it would have cost between $10,000 and $15,000 before shipping and installation. You're talking about something that would have been 2/3 or 3/4 of the price all in. That's a great option, and depending on what your goals are, I might recommend that first. Like I said earlier, LFP is the way to go, regardless of the...
Okay, so he paid 33 grand for the battery setup, and that is pretty typical. That's how much I would say to plan on spending if you're going for a full service, professionally installed battery system added on to your solar panel system. It's about 30 grand more before the tax credits than if you were just to do the solar panels and microinverters by themselves. Now, of course, there are some do-it-yourself options that might get you in at a fraction of that cost, but if you want a full professional install from a system like Enphase, that's about what you can expect to pay. Let's continue.
Brand. However, for me, there was a perk with the brand angle. It's one source for all the maintenance or warranty claims, and it's a great 15-year warranty. It also ties into my SPAN smart electric panel for virtualized critical loads that I can modify on the fly. It's also a battery supported by the Connected Solutions program, which is the virtual power plant program that operates in my area. And none of that would have been possible with the more DIY BigBattery.com example. For my goals and things I wanted, the all-inclusive Enphase approach made the most sense. Installing a battery system like I did also qualifies for the solar incentives, which means a 30% tax rebate that I can apply to my federal taxes.
All right, he's going to go into all these different incentives now to where the battery makes more sense. You get your 30% federal tax credit. In some cases, in California, you get a credit from the local utility based on how much battery storage you install. And so he's going to make the argument here that basically getting all these batteries is no more expensive. At the end of the day, no more expensive than getting a whole home propane generator installed. And I would agree with that. I mean, especially if you consider the lifetime operating cost of a generator, all the cost of the fuel, all the cost of doing your annual maintenance package, the oil changes, the air filters, all of that adds up. And that's one nice thing about a solar and battery system is that once it's up and running, it's pretty much set it and forget it. Well, as long as the software and everything is working properly, there's no like physical maintenance to do on the equipment.
What about the pros and cons? Well, since I'm all in on the Enphase system, I'm using the Enlighten app to manage everything. It's actually a fantastic app with really great insights into energy usage, generation, historical data, and more. Just like all the major platforms like Tesla, it has a storm guard mode that will automatically make sure your battery is fully charged and ready for any big storms in your area.
Okay, so this is a problem I think with a lot of these modern battery systems, the ones that are all software controlled, is that you have to use the app to actually be able to tell your equipment what to do. Now, for those of you out there like me, my interest in solar started because I was in part of like the off-grid prepper homesteader community where I just wanted to be more self-sufficient for security reasons. So the last thing I really want if I'm preparing for a true grid down or an off-grid operation, the last thing I personally want is a system where I have to use an app or I have to have internet access or I have to have cell phone service to be able to use the equipment. It's part of the reason why I personally chose to install Solarc at my home here in South Carolina is because I can literally go out to the garage, go to the Solarc, and I can program and I can operate the functions of that system using the touch screen. I don't have to use the app. But it depends on your situation. If what you're looking for is a seamless, easy to use solar and storage system and you don't mind the fact that it needs a grid connected world, an internet connected world for it to operate at full capacity, then that's fine. If you're more like me, planning for the zombie apocalypse, I want something that more I can physically control it right there at the property.
Just a week or two ago, my system automatically went into a storm event for some major high winds and rain that came through the area. You could also configure the system to be either self-consumption, savings, or full backup. I'm running my system in self-consumption mode, which optimizes to use as much of my solar generated power for myself as possible. I've also got it set to never dip below 30% as an emergency backup buffer.
Yeah, now that self-consumption mode is important too, because especially as net metering programs are going away, the solar buyback program's going away, to the extent possible, you want to be your own utility. You power the house on solar directly during daytime hours. Whatever excess solar production you have, you charge it in the battery. Then you run your home off the battery power at nighttime. And then you only draw from the power company if your batteries fall below that critical threshold. So he referenced 30% being that critical threshold. He won't let the batteries go below that. So then if you need more nighttime power, then you'll draw it from the power company as a last resort option only. So I think a lot of folks that are going to be doing solar with batteries are going to be using this self-consumption mode as those net metering programs continue to go away. Let's go back to the video.
And any excess solar production beyond that point will get sent into the grid. If I had time of use electricity rates, I'd most likely be running in savings mode. That will store energy to make sure that you're only pulling from the grid when energy is the cheapest, which is usually at night, and exporting or using stored energy when it's the most expensive. That can save you a lot of money. And full backup should be, well, self-explanatory because it keeps your battery at 100% for emergency backup only. Now, Enphase also has their own EV charger that ties directly into their controller, which means you can charge your EV only when you have excess solar production. I'm not using their EV charger, but I have the same functionality that I rolled on my own with some smart controls and my SPAN smart panel. That actually leads to some of the cons that I've experienced. Now, while the SPAN smart panel ties in directly to Tesla's system for very accurate tracking of your Powerwall's charging status, the way it integrates with Enphase is, well, it's a little fuzzy. SPAN created something they call the Remote Meter Kit, which allows SPAN to tie into other systems like Enphase. It's not tied into the main controller in the same way as Tesla, so it's more of a battery charge estimation than an actual number reported by Enphase. It hasn't been the most accurate reporting so far. There's a drift that keeps happening with the system. For instance, while my Enphase may show my charge at 35%, my SPAN shows my battery charge at 27% charge. SPAN does have a way to recalibrate, which seems to be helping the accuracy over time, but it's still only an estimation.
Yeah, and see, this is just an example of part of the challenge when you're trying to mix and match components from different manufacturers. And I think this is where we get into that trade-off of, do we want to keep everything on the same ecosystem so the softwares have a tight integration with each other, or do you want to be able to mix and match? Now, SPAN has what I believe is a best-in-class intelligent load control smart panel. But the problem is it's a SPAN proprietary product. And so if you want to have granular data, like for example, real-time battery status, you just don't have that right now, between SPAN and another manufacturer. Now, Enphase, I should mention, and he doesn't mention it here yet, but Enphase does have their own load control solution. It's just not up to the level of what SPAN has with their entire home smart panel. But Enphase does have a load control option. Let's say if he just had to control like 4 or 8 circuits, he could have put a couple of Enphase load controllers into the system. Of course, that would be more gray boxes and conduits on the wall there in the garage, but he could have kept it all on the Enphase platform. So definitely something to consider here. Do you want to mix and match, or do you want to have one seamless ecosystem user experience?
This is potentially a big deal considering the purpose of the SPAN is to automatically shed circuits I've configured in the app to save power and extend the battery. It will shed some circuits immediately and others once the battery is below 50% charge. If the calibration is way off, that could cause some problems. And like I said though, it has been getting much more accurate with each recalibration, so it's in the ballpark almost all the time now. I just wish it was more tightly integrated and on the money accurate. The other con, which is something I've already mentioned, is cost. The one ray of sunshine on that count is a program I was able to take advantage of here in Massachusetts. There's a 0% interest heat loan available to people upgrading their furnaces to something like a heat pump, but it also can work with battery installations. Navigating the application process for this loan was absolutely bonkers and slightly maddening, but we got the loan approved. And I'm not going to complain too much because it is a 0% interest rate. Without that option though, getting a battery installation like this is out of reach for most people. Batteries only really start to make some financial sense if you have time of use rates or a virtual power plant program available. If you have both, you can make a massive dent in the cost. So what would I have done differently? I probably wouldn't have changed anything, but the timing of us installing a home battery when we did ended up being a little awkward. There are a bunch of different battery technologies hitting the market right now that could be easier to install, like those modular systems I mentioned earlier that are flooding the market right now. For example, there's the Anker Solix or the EcoFlow Delta Pro Ultra, which could start very small, and then you literally just stack more units over time to expand your capability. Now, I might have opted for something like that if the timing had worked out better. However, there's a crazy permitting requirement in my area for batteries installed inside a residential structure, like my garage. If I'd installed over 20 kilowatt hours of energy storage in my garage, I would have had to install a sprinkler system. That would have cost thousands and thousands of dollars to do. Now, I get that there's a concern over battery fires, but here's the part that kills me. I have a car with over 60 kilowatt hours of NCM battery chemistry cells parked in my garage. Do I need a sprinkler system for that? Nope. LFP is extremely safe. It's much safer than NCM, but the local regulations don't make any kind of distinction for that.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. He meant to say NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt. That's the chemistry. The chemistry that's in those Tesla vehicle batteries is actually the one that's most prone to thermal runaway and catching on fire. The lithium iron phosphate batteries, on contrast, they operate much cooler and they're not subject to thermal runaway. So there's another example of the government really not keeping up. Regulations have not kept up with the technology, but they try. Let's finish out here.
All those new modular systems would have run into the same exact issue in my area. Another thing that I couldn't have changed but could have been better prepared for was what I alluded to in the beginning, and that's the delays. The Enphase 5P batteries were launched last summer, and based on when your order was placed, you fell into the queue. And for me, that meant a long delay. Since my setup was grid-tied, there's also permitting hoops that I had to jump through with the utility, so I also ended up in a bit of permitting hell. I know my installer's heart's gonna sink when I say that, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I should warn you guys too, when you do a solar with battery storage installation, the permitting process could take double the amount of time. It's more complex engineering plans. In fact, in the case of Enphase, I believe Enphase requires that they do the plan set for you. But then when you submit that to your local AHJ, your local city or county government for the permit, their plan review process is likely to take a lot longer as well, because it's likely a more senior plan reviewer that's going to have to review it. Usually what happens is the entry-level person looks at it and says, this looks way too complex. I'm going to have to go, send this up the totem pole, send this up the chain, until somebody senior enough that actually understands what they're looking at can say, okay, this looks sound, this looks code compliant, and then permits can be issued. And it could be a similar thing on the back end of the install when it comes time for the inspections, because it's most likely going to be a more senior inspector that knows how to look at, how to analyze the battery system to see if it was installed properly. Let's close out.
I'm not upset by any of those delays, but was just a little frustrated by the whole situation. I also find it hysterical that my utility calls the grid-tied energy storage system application process a, quote, expedited application. A 2-month wait for them is expedited. All in, it took 6 months to get this installed. Still, it all worked out in the end, and my installation team did an awesome job. Big hat tip to those guys. They did a great job. Now we'll have to wait and see how the numbers work out for the virtual power plant program, but the costs of the system were worth it to my family for our goals. If you have similar goals as I do for home energy generation and storage, then I definitely recommend taking a closer look at something like this Enphase system. But depending on your goals, you may have better luck with the more modular systems that you can start small and build over time.
Yeah, so that was a good discussion. I think for many individuals watching out there, especially many of you that have been following the Solar Surge channel for a while, the Enphase ecosystem, the overall Enphase ecosystem is a good choice. It gets your solar microinverters, your battery storage. They're working on a bidirectional EV charger, so that bidirectional EV capability should be available in the near future. They give you a generator hookup option and then be able to control everything on a single app. So this has been a review here of Matt Farrell's video on the Enphase IQ Battery 5P, why he chose that for his net zero home. Folks, as always, if you're getting good value from the videos you watch on Solar Surge, make sure you give us a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button as well if you haven't done so already. That way, as we have new videos or reaction videos like this coming out, it'll come up on your feed and you can stay up to date with us. Of course, if you're a homeowner and you're in the process of evaluating solar or battery storage options for your home, if you need to get a price quote or you just need to get a comparison to make sure that you're getting the right equipment, getting the best deal, as always, you can feel free to reach out to us on the link below there. Set up a call with a solar expert or just use our free online quote tool so you can see how much solar and battery storage costs in your area. Well, that does it for today's reaction video. As always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. All right, I hope you're getting some great value from today's video content. Now, if you would like to have your business or product or technology featured on the Solar Surge channel, we can help you do that. Feel free to use the link below to set up a call with our media team so that we can discuss your marketing goals and how Solar Surge can help you get there. Solar Surge is the leading online community in the U.S. residential solar and energy storage space. And so if you would like to have your business or product or technology introduced to our audience, we can help you do that. Again, feel free to reach out to us on the link below to set up a call with our media team or email media@solarsurge.net.